Good afternoon. Welcome family, colleagues, students, former students, and friends of Dr. Paul Jones. And thank you so much for attending our life celebration service for Paul. My name is Dr. Leanne Putney. I'm chair of the Department of Educational Psychology and Higher Education, in which Paul was a lifelong faculty member. I would like to thank the family for their guidance and collaboration in the planning of today's event, as well as Dean Metcalf of the College of Education. And we have with him today also Mrs. Metcalf Diane, who's here with us. Thank you for coming. I'd also like to thank Provost White and his office for their co-sponsorship of this event. At the request of the family, and in recognition of Dr. Jones' technological event, we are both videoing and webcasting this celebration. So we have Young Buck Kim to thank for the webcasting prowess. And actually, we have people at this point who are texting in. So as we go through, if we see more of those, we'll have the inbox switched to that for us so you can see. Okay. I have been asked to go see this event, and I'm extremely honored to do so. But I was expecting to be doing this in a couple of years as Paul's retirement party. He did tell me that if I would give him 3 more years as chair, he would give me 3 more years as faculty member, so I took him up on it. He almost did it. Nevertheless, we have selected a few spokespeople who are going to offer comments regarding Paul's service and mentorship from a variety of perspectives. And then we'll offer an open microphone to those of you in attendance who would also like to share some additional comments. To begin, I would like to introduce to you Dean Kim Metcalf of the College of Ed, and he's going to provide a perspective of Paul's work within the College of Education and across the university campus. Dean Metcalf.
Thank you, Leanne. Those of you who know me will not be surprised to learn that I'm not going to follow instructions completely. It strikes me that everyone here is here because they knew Paul and they knew what he did for students, for colleagues, for children and families, and for me to try to provide some context for that. Having known him less than a year, it seems completely unfair to the rest of you who knew and loved him for many, many, many years. What I would like to do is simply say that Paul, for me, represented the epitome of the perfect faculty member, that he represented all that I believe is good about working in the academy, and that he reflected all that is wonderful about colleagues in the academy. He was incredibly articulate. He was incredibly bright. He loved ideas. He loved teaching, and he wanted to make the world different and better. He touched every one of our lives. Even mine in the short time I knew him. But I watched him interact with students, particularly at the doctoral celebrations. I watched the respect and awe they had for him. I watched the respect and love he had for them. And I thought, I'm going to grow up to be like Paul. Thank you all for coming. This is the kind of tribute I know Paul would have loved. It's our honor to be a part of it. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Now I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Kotler to the stand. He's a former faculty member and a longtime friend and collaborator with Paul, and he's going to share some thoughts with us.
Oh, Paul, I wish you could see this right now. I wish you could see all the people that are here to honor what you've done for them. As a colleague, as a teacher, as a mentor, and as a friend. I promise not to do a Clint Eastwood and talk to the chair. But I really do feel his presence in the room. I've spent 40 years of my professional life writing about and researching about the congruence between what teachers and what faculty and what counselors and what therapists preach to others and what they do and practice in their own lives. The congruence between the compassion and the sensitivity and the respect and the caring that we tell teachers and psychologists and counselors is so important, that the relationships that we develop are everything in terms of the influence that we have on other people. I've researched and written a lot about the hypocrisy between the incongruence between how we walk through our lives and what we teach to our students. I met Paul relatively early in my career, almost 30 years ago. And he was one of my first mentors at a particularly vulnerable and fragile time in my life, in terms of evolving who I was as an academic, who I was as a counselor and a therapist and a teacher. And we created a tribe together to support one another through hard times. And one of the things that was so remarkable to me and so influential and so impactful on my life as a teacher and a professor and a psychologist and a counselor and a teacher and a friend was how Paul walked through life actually living what he taught to others. And I see heads nodding because there are so many of you in the room that experience directly his love and his caring for other people, his integrity and his steadiness. I had a conversation with some family members before, and we were just marveling. I was kind of curious, investigating about what was he like in your family. What was he like as a grandfather? What was he like as a father? And indeed, we were both marveling at sharing notes about how that congruence in terms of his love and his caring and his dedication, his commitment to making a difference in the world, to being a loving person with everyone he met. And I know that there's so many people in this room that can testify that as well. I also marveled at the way that he could metabolize stress and conflict in you might say, a rather enriched political environment, which makes up many of our academic units, where there's so much competition and so many different kinds of relationships to navigate. And Paul was always the steady hand. He was always the voice of reassurance. He was always the voice of compassion and such incredible patience. We wrote 2 books together, and it's really intriguing the conversations that we had about why does the world need another book, and what might we do that not only presents an outcome, but a process. And it was really interesting that our priority in coming up with an idea for a book about how teachers and counselors and therapists can seek supervision outside of an authoritarian hierarchy, we talked about it in terms of how can we mentor our junior faculty in our department and help them get referee publications? How can we teach them to write? How can we teach them what's involved in succeeding in the publishing world? I know people say things like this all the time, like, I just got an email the other day, or I just got a letter the other day, but I drove to Las Vegas last night from Southern California, where Ellen and I live, and opened my email, as we're inclined to do so many times a day, and there was an email from a colleague in another university that said, I just discovered this book that you wrote with Paul Jones called Understanding Research. And it's the first textbook I've ever found that makes research truly accessible for students who could care less about research. And that happened yesterday. And I can't speak for Paul and the emails that he might have received, but one of the amazing things for all of you here who are scholars and writers is that in some sense we never die as long as our voices live forever in the manuscripts we create, in and the voices that our students and our grandchildren and our children and our friends and our families remember. That as long as we remember those voices of reassurance and compassion, Paul lives forever. And it's our job, all of us here, to make sure that happens. I know I speak for everyone in the room, Paul, that we are so grateful on behalf of the tens of thousands of lives that you touch, the psychologists and the counselors and the teachers and the readers whose lives you touch as a result not only of your incredible expertise, incredible knowledge, and incredible integrity, but also your love and your compassion. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was wonderful. And now to share his perspective from the Department of Educational Psychology and Higher Education, and specifically the School Psychology Program area. I give you Dr. Scott Bell.
So here we are. Certainly, as Leanne had mentioned before, this was not exactly a gathering that I was expecting to have. I've been thinking for quite some time about what I might say Paul's retirement, to toast his many accomplishments over the course of his career, and to thank him for everything that he's done for me personally, and that I know he's done for many people sitting here today. And words escape now that the moment actually came. I figured I'd be pretty much off the hook because Paul was always going to retire in 2 years for about the last 10 years. There are so many images that we have that would remind us of Paul. Some are humorous and displayed back behind me. The little man in the white hair with the red lowrider truck that he replaced with the hot rod truck. His love for the Dallas Cowboys, which I've not been able to quite figure out. But he explained to me at one time, as he was a New Mexican by birth and a Texan by the grace of God. He wanted that, always. So symbols have been difficult turning over in my head. And one stands out to me personally as being very poignant, and it's this chair that is right here. It's not poignant because he was ever seen using it himself. It's poignant because when he got it upon completing 20 years at this institution, which I believe was 2009, he put it in his office, and it was an open invitation to come and sit down and talk about everything or nothing at all. And I got to know Paul fairly well sitting in that chair. And so to see it empty is something that's missing for me personally, and something that's missing for me professionally. I think like a lot of us, whether we're willing to admit it or not, when we come into the academy as fresh, new people, we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. And we feel like a deer in the headlights. Nobody can calm that down. And nobody ever will be able to calm that down like Paul was able to. He had a way of cutting through all of the noise and all of the thoughts that he knew were going on in your head that you were worried about, and a way of reminding you not to sweat the small stuff, and that it's actually all small stuff, except that it's not. But when it was, nobody could handle it as gracefully and as calmly as he did. And I find it interesting to hear that from other people who have been mentored by him over the years, that was one trait that he had that never changed. We owe a lot to him in this college. This college looks the way that it does today because of his even-handed leadership during the worst crisis in its history. I owe him a tremendous amount of gratitude because of how he helped to mentor me, to teach me how to write and be curious professionally. And that's not just a good thing, it's a gift, it's a wonderful thing, and nobody did it better than he did. I learned how to mentor students right alongside him. And as I try to do this more on my own, they are big, very, very big shoes to fill. And I don't know that I will ever have the ability to fill them as adequately as others ever mine. He helped me feel welcome here when I came to Las Vegas with my wife in 2003. And we asked ourselves, we just moved to Las Vegas. He got to know my wife and my son a little bit later in recent years. And of the many, many things that I learned from him, I learned how lucky I am to be married to my own wife because she helped Dorothy and Paul do some work on their house. And he went on and on about how wonderful the experience was and how cool it was to have blue jeans in his walls. Ask me about it afterwards. He thought that was about the neatest thing in the world. And so we developed a friendship over the years that, for me, has come to resemble more of a father figure, I think, more than anything. He could always tell me what I needed to hear, whether I wanted to hear it or not. And I think that's invaluable. So, wherever you are, I miss you, I love you, and I will miss the conversations that we had in that chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I'll tell you more about the chair in a little bit, because there's more to be said. Now, representing the student perspective, we have two former students from School of Psychology and higher PhD program, Dr. Michelle Nathan and Dr. Van Rager, and they're going to help us out with what the students, what home meant to students.
Jones, he's an amazing professor and mentor. He cares so much about all of his students as well as the profession.
Most of the students' first experiences with Dr. Jones was in the role of professor-student relationship.
One of my first experiences with Dr. Jones was actually in one of my introductory classes. Dr. Jones was there as a guest speaker, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy sure likes to talk. But he also did the opposite. When he was interacting with other people, his ability to hold back, waiting until just the right moment to make an insightful comment, I think that was truly an art form. I once watched Dr. Jones quell a situation that I was pretty sure was going to turn into World War III. He didn't take sides. He didn't use his expertise or power to try to control the situation. Instead, he listened, he observed, and he respected everyone until a solution had been reached. I I thank Dr. Jones for teaching me that it isn't always about asserting my opinion as loudly as possible, although I'm still working on that. But through his example, he showed that observing, reflecting, and smiling and nodding is sometimes all it is needed. And that's not something you can learn with a textbook.
I had many classes with Dr. Jones over the course of 2 school psychology degrees that I earned at UNLV. Each one was very challenging, but also very rewarding. He always came out of the class with a great deal of knowledge. He made sure you kept you on your toes by looking one direction and asking somebody sitting in the opposite direction the question. So you never knew who was going to call him. But he would always ask random questions as well. But he would always bring it back to the topic, and it would always make sense and make a particular point. I remember one class that was co-taught with the counselor education department. Halfway through the class, we split up into 2 groups. Dr. Jones asked our group what color shirt someone in the other group was wearing. None of us could answer it. But it brought back to the point regarding the power of observation. And to this day, I still remember that, and I make sure to do my observations like they should be and watch everything that's going on around me.
For both of us, Dr. Jones was not just our advisor, but a mentor and personal counselor at times.
In fact, he played a large role in both of our decisions to stay at UNLV for our doctoral degrees.
For me, already having that relationship with Dr. Jones was really important. Without him, I'm sure I would have gotten through the program eventually. But I may have actually had one of those complete and total meltdowns like I thought I eventually would. My anxiety would soar, and I would start catastrophizing about what was going to happen in my program. My husband would just look at me and say, "You just need to go talk to Dr. Jones." And he was right. I think also thankful that I returned to sanity after talking with Dr. Jones. But as any of you who have had him as an advisor or mentor know, he wasn't there trying to push an agenda on you. In his person-centered way, he listened and supported to help you try to find some solutions.
Dr. Jones was my lifelong mentor. While I was in the program and then after graduating from the program, he wanted to see each of his students succeed. I remember that, he decided to get together a dissertation guidance group. And it was all of us that were going through the dissertation at the same time. He would always provide us all with great guidance that helped each of us advance towards graduation. Without him, I don't think I would have gotten to that point too, him and Dr. Lowe. We remained in close contact after, and he continued to the very end to give me career advice and talk with me about my future. There was never a time that I felt like he was too busy to talk or answer emails even at 2 o'clock in the morning.
As that kind of person-centered guy, Dr. Jones was really open to what I thought my program should look like. I would kind of tell him what I wanted, and he just went with it. But it's through this process that I realized just how many people in the professional community Dr. Jones knew. He knew everybody. I remember years ago putting in all this time and research, trying to find a practical placement, and I pitched it to Dr. Jones, and he just said, "Oh, yeah, great. I know the psychologist over there. Let me make a phone call." But it doesn't stop. I recently needed some help from a colleague in the community, and this woman, she and I never met before. But as we started talking and she realized I had studied under Dr. Jones, she went on to speak of how well she knew him and respected him, and she ended up actually helping me out immensely. I guess I owe you another one, Dr. Jones. Still pulling strings.
Dr. Jones had a way with words. His emails were always reassuring and uplifting. He knew exactly what to say when I was stressed out and worried to get me over those hurdles. One of his favorite sayings to me was that the PhD program was a marathon and not a sprint, because I kept asking him and begging him and pleading with him how fast I could get out of the program.
Dr. Jones had a great sense of humor, and he was real.
That allowed each of us to get to know him. We always had those sidebar conversations that we got to learn about how he loved his grandkids, the Cowboys, and the TV drama Nip Tuck.
And for those of you who don't know, that's a TV melodrama that is unsuitable for children for many reasons. But I think because of that, a few of us may have ended up watching that show as well.
After I defended my dissertation, he would always correct me when I would call him Dr. Jones, because he wanted me to call him Paul. It got to the point where he started addressing me as Dr. Nathan. Since I could not call him Paul, and to this day I still cannot. He will always be Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones will always be remembered as that professor, mentor, who was funny, intelligent, calming, who cared about every one of his students.
His legacy will live on in each person whose life he has touched and career he has helped mold.
We can't thank him enough for everything that he's done and for the impact that he has had on all of us.
He will truly be missed.
You and
UNLV won't be the same without him.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Rhiannon. I know how difficult that was. We now have Mr. Steve Shercliffe, who's going to share with us the family perspective.
I'm tall here. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today. The other speakers talked about the effect Paul had on them and his contributions to UNLV. I want to speak about Paul at home. I first met Paul in 1979 when I was coming home from holidays from college. This would have been when him and mother had been dating a short time. Paul was living in the Mark I building, the penthouse of the Mark I building. And Mom was fixing a big Thanksgiving meal at his bachelor cabin. Paul, wanting to impress his newly met family members, asked Mom if he could help with anything. And Mom, not being a shy one, said, sure, you can peel the potatoes. I'm not sure who was more surprised, Paul, that Mom actually took him up on the offer, or Mom, when Paul told her he does not know how to peel potatoes. That started what became a wonderful 35-year relationship with Mom and Paul, understanding each other's role. Mom would stay clear of his home office, where he spent untold hours preparing for his classes and his private practice, and Paul would stay out of the kitchen except for using the microwave. As you all know, Paul was a highly intelligent man. He was also a fun person. With him being a huge Dallas Cowboy fan and myself being a Washington Redskin fan, we had 2 dates a year where we'd watch them play each other. We started with small couple dollar bets where it was more just the loser having to acknowledge that their team lost by paying the $2 to the victor. One of Paul's first payments to me consisted of a bunch of pennies covered in molasses and sealed in a bell jar. Those were, and that photo was up there, as a matter of fact. You would see that with him and I standing next to each other. Those were fun times. And Thanksgiving was always a delicate affair. Mom rarely took into account the Cowboys' kickoff time when planning when we'd sit for dinner. The general compromise was Paul could sit facing the TV, but the sound had to be muted. And aside from his marriage and the accomplishments of his kids and grandkids, the happiest I've seen him is when Dallas scored a touchdown or was victorious. And if we happened to be in the other room, we never, besides him screaming, we heard this coming from the living room. There's a few other things on there, but that was the main just we have this thing, the battery is wonderful, it's lasting. One area obvious to all of you that Paul cared deeply about was education. This was not just while on the job. Mom mentioned to me once that when the clerk would help them out to the car with their groceries, Paul would encourage him to get an education. A stranger to Paul, but he sincerely cared about that kid advancing himself. And one thing I'll always remember is a very short quote of his. Donna, you'll know this one. Whether it was myself expressing doubt that I could further my education with my full-time job, or his daughter Donna wondering if she could succeed in returning to school to enter a master's program in speech pathology, his answer was always a confident, well, sure you can. He knew our abilities, encouraged us, and was right. The best times I spent with Paul were on the tennis court. We played for 25 years or so, and were a great match for each other. He had the finesse, and I was scrappy, as I'll say. I'd say his finesse won out about 60% of the time. As much as the tennis, I also enjoyed the short walk from his home to the court and back. That was a special bonding time where he'd give me career advice, we commiserated over UNLV sports, and we just chatted about life. Paul's daughter Donna wanted to add the following. My dad was my inspiration, my hero really. I looked to him when I felt insecure because he always believed in me. He believed in all of us. Didn't you love how he helped us realize we could accomplish our dreams even when problems seemed huge? And how he could find the humorous part of any situation and always made us laugh. He showed me how to live with his strength and determination and his amazing sense of humor, his boundless quest for knowledge, his dignity, and his care for others. I wish I'd had more time with him, but it would never have been enough. I miss you, Daddy. While we will all deeply miss Paul, he has left a great legacy of grandchildren. Artistic, athletic, and full of life, Jenna, Lindsay, and Trevor. The three most well-adjusted, outgoing young ladies I know, Christy, Carrie, and Alicia, and hardworking and caring Mike. They all looked up to him, and he beamed with pride whenever in their presence. Mom, I know you had a lot of fun adventures with Paul, from Boston to New York City to Japan to London to Paris, a train ride along the Copper Canyon in Mexico, the boat ride down the Nile River. I'm sorry? The cruise down the Nile River, excuse me. There was a small boat at the top. And then the adventures that Mom got him to go on, such as the blimp ride when the blimp was here for a short time, and the hot air balloon ride. He drew the line, though, at the paragliding in San Diego. I think he stood and watched Mom jump off the cliff. But I know Mom, as fun as those adventures were, I know it was just as fun for you and nice when you were cuddled up in your left seat watching a movie. We had a big celebration for Mom's 70th birthday a few years back. Paul did not want his big party until his 75th. While he did not make it to his big day a month ago, I hope all can leave here knowing the huge impact he had on UNLV, his private practice, and his friends and family. Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much for that heartfelt comments. And I know for those of us in academia, we always knew of Paul's family life, and we knew Dorothy. He would bring her to the parties that we had. But it's so gratifying to hear it from your words and your mouth of how wonderful he felt about his family and how wonderful his family was to him and with him. So thank you so much. Okay. Now, while preparing this celebration, we wanted to keep Paul close by, so we brought some artifacts representing dear Dr. Jones from his office. His UNLV anniversary chair has already been noted by some folks here. I did spend many hours sitting in that chair as well, very often talking and sometimes not talking so much and allowing him to talk to me. Also, his Indiana Jones hat and whip. He had Katrina and Kathy Ducase like to see him coming and shout out, Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones. And so his favorite thing was to have his Indiana Jones hat. Thank goodness he never actually used the whip on anybody that I know of. We also have his ever-present cowboy boots and his ever-present Diet Coke. He was rarely without either one of those. And we also brought his revered altered reality Photoshop retrospective of the life and times of Billy Paul. This was presented to him by his former office staff, Deirdre and Trish. He's represented in various historic events, from the Grant Wood American Gothic painting to the Statue of Liberty, Buddha, the Sphinx, appearing on Mount Rushmore, one of my favorites, as well as the famous Beatles poster. There he is over in the corner as Paul. The print represents to me Paul's incredible sense of humor, and you will see one of those doctored photos just a little bit later. But we wanted to share that with everybody today because it really is the essence of Paul and the type of person that he was. I heard from so many people in preparing this event who gave tribute to Paul, from near and from far, from many of you here today, also from others who could not be here in person. And we've heard varying perspectives, some overlapping themes, describing this man who was taken from us much too soon. Besides having an outpouring of love and affection, we also have people noted his sense of humor. And some people refer to it as a wicked sense of humor, and others call it a killer sense of humor. Paul was a musician, a Dallas Cowboys fan, which likewise never really understood that, a family man who loved and enjoyed his blended family, an academic who kept it real, a man of the people who was dedicated to the people around him, always ready with a quick smile and a determined cowboy boot footstep, willing to share what he knew with whoever would care to listen, and more often in a kind of thoughtful yet thought-provoking way. We couldn't share everything that everyone wrote, so being the ethnographer that I am by trade, I put together some themes and categories, and I prepared a PowerPoint of some quotes, and also a word cloud. And the word cloud is a wonderful graphic, and they're words that are randomly generated from the people whose lives he touched. I did not place these were random. You will note that the larger the words are, the more they were evident in the text. I think it most fitting that the word at the top is impact. And then Dr. Jones is described as Dr. Kind, wonderful mentor, colleague, sage, Professor Jones. And it's also described as cowboy, humor, smile, calm, significant, knowledgeable scholar, and eternally incredible. And now I bring you the voices from the people. do have two from some folks who could not be here today. Doug Lombardi, who is now at Temple University. Dr. Jones was my first UNLV professor. He taught me how to write a CV. He also wrote a recommendation for me when I applied to the Insight PhD program. For that and for all his kind support, I will be forever grateful. And for Bill Marks, who sends aloha ahoi from Hawaii. Dr. Jones, a great professor, my life mentor, and a true friend who I miss. My heart goes out to family, friends, and colleagues for this loss of a truly outstanding, exceptional, and heartwarming friend. I miss you so much, Paul, and I'm grateful for everything you taught me. Goodbye, my friend, until we meet again.
These colleagues have asked me to share their words on their behalf. This is from Jill Cohen Sinoja. Dr. Jones, words can't express what you've meant to me and our cohort. You've been our rock in this program, and though I wish you could have been by my side for graduation in May, I know you're looking down on me and all of us, probably from a flashy sports car, and sending witty words of encouragement in all our future endeavors. This is from Laura Conrad. I can honestly say Dr. Jones will always be one of my favorite people. He was my professor and committee chair, but more importantly, he was an incredible role model and mentor. He always knew the right thing to say to comfort or reassure me during yet another grad school-related meltdown. He knew how to inspire and motivate me, and his sense of humor was second to none. Dr. Jones will always have a special place in my heart, and although I will no longer receive a thoughtful email response from him sent at 2 o'clock in the morning, I know the lessons he taught me will always remain. So from here on out, as I run into obstacles that life will inevitably throw at me, I will pause and ask myself, what would Dr. Jones do? And this last one is from Kristen Bjork. I don't really know what to say about Dr. Jones because there's just so much I could say. I guess the biggest things are, number one, he felt more like a family member than a professor, and he could always make me laugh when I was ready to cry. And two, he would always say he needed to tell me one more quick thing, which would turn out to be a 30-minute story, usually referencing things that happened to him in earlier decades. But I didn't mind. His stories were the best.
Thank you. So thank you all. Does anybody else want anything? Thank you all for coming today to share our tribute to Paul. Paul was our rock and our guide, and I loved the picture of him as a quarterback, and I got thinking he really was the quarterback. He loved to call the shots. He knew when to pass. He knew who to pass the ball to. He knew when to run the ball in. He knew when to throw it away. And he also knew how to get the team going and get the team moving. So he was a great leader. He was a great quarterback for us all. We love him and miss him very, very much. I do want to have a special thank you for everyone who helped put this event together, the sponsors that are listed in our program, to Sheila and Francis in the Dean's office who did so much, to Young Bach who helped us so much for his technical assistance, to our assistant Kim Colbert who did a lot of behind-the-scenes setup. We invite you now to enjoy one last tribute to our dear Dr. Paul Jones, and we'll show this to you briefly as you make your way to the food and the